In the year 1842, deep in the heart of Georgia's cotton empire, one woman ruled her land like a queen without a king. Her name was Eleanor Whitfield, and her plantation stretched farther than the eye could see, rows of white cotton glimmering under the southern sun. But behind those grand white columns and polite Sunday smiles, Eleanor was hiding an idea that would stain her family's name forever. When her husband, Thomas Whitfield, died suddenly of fever, Eleanor inherited everything: land, money, and over 200 enslaved souls. The neighbors whispered that no woman should run such a vast estate alone. But Eleanor didn't listen. She believed the Whitfields were destined for greatness, that their blood was stronger, purer, chosen by God. And so she made it her mission to keep that power alive, even if it meant bending every law of nature and morality to do it. Every night, she would sit by the fire in her husband's study, staring at his old ledgers and a cracked portrait of her 5 daughters. Each one was beautiful, tall, and pale, but Eleanor saw something missing. "They have my grace," she would whisper, "but not his strength." To her, strength meant control, power, dominance. Soon she became obsessed with finding a way to improve her bloodline. Life on the Whitfield plantation ran like a clock, at least on the surface. The enslaved worked from dawn until the cicadas fell silent at dusk. Overseers shouted, cotton gins clattered, and Eleanor watched from her balcony, cold and still as marble. Among the workers, one man stood out: Josiah, tall, broad-shouldered, silent. His gaze could cut through stone. He had been sold from Virginia years ago, educated just enough to read the Bible, and known for his strange calm, the kind that made overseers uneasy. When Eleanor first saw him, it wasn't through lust or pity. It was calculation. She said nothing that day, but her eyes lingered longer than they should have. That night, the servants whispered about the mistress' interest. "Miss Elena been asking about that tall one," said an old woman named Ruth. Another shook her head. "Ain't no good come when a lady stares too long at one of us." But the rumors didn't stop. By the next month, Eleanor had ordered the overseer to move Josiah closer, give him lighter work, bring him near the main house. She said it was because he was reliable. But everyone on the plantation knew nothing Eleanor Whitfield did was ever without reason. Late one evening, as the house slept, Eleanor stood by her mirror, staring at her reflection. Her once youthful beauty had begun to fade beneath candlelight. Her eldest daughter, Marianne, would soon turn 17, the same age Eleanor was when she first married. That night, she whispered to herself, "The Whitfield name must not fade. I will build a stronger line, a perfect line." She reached for her husband's portrait, tracing his face with trembling fingers. "You failed to give me a son," she murmured, "but I will finish what you started." The plan was forming, dark, forbidden, and unholy. The next morning, Josiah was summoned to the main house. He stood before Eleanor, sweat glistening on his skin after a long day in the fields. She looked him over with a quiet intensity, then said simply, "From now on, you'll work under my direction. The overseer will report to me." Josiah nodded, but didn't speak. Behind his calm eyes, something flickered. Suspicion or fear. Outside, the wind swept through the cotton fields, carrying whispers the house couldn't contain. The servants talked, and the overseer avoided the mistress' gaze because everyone on the Whitfield plantation knew one thing for certain. When Eleanor Whitfield set her mind on something, she never stopped. Not until she got it. As days turned to weeks, Josiah became a silent fixture near the main house. He repaired the roof, carried firewood, and worked in the shade of the porch while Eleanor watched, always watching. Her daughters noticed. Marianne, the eldest, was the first to ask, "Mama, why are you watching him?" she asked one afternoon as her mother leaned over the balcony. Eleanor didn't turn her head. "A mother must choose carefully, my dear. The future of this house depends on strength, not softness. Marianne's face tightened. She didn't fully understand, but something in her mother's tone chilled her. That night, she heard the servants whispering. "She's taken him for something," Ruth muttered. "What kind of something?" Someone whispered back. "Not what God intended." Marianne lay awake long after the voices quieted, her heart pounding. Something wasn't right in that house. Something was coming. The next week, Elena ordered Josiah to serve wine at the family dinner, an unusual demand. The daughters sat silently while their mother's eyes lingered too long on the tall man, pouring their glasses. "Strong hands," Elena said aloud, watching him. "Hands that could shape destiny." Marianne dropped her spoon. Her younger sister Clara stared wide-eyed at their mother. After dinner, Elena dismissed everyone except Josiah. The hallway went silent. The daughters listened from the stairs as footsteps echoed, a door creaked, and then nothing. Josiah became a shadow in the big house. Always near, never far from sight. The daughters spoke less. The servants stopped laughing in the kitchen. Even the overseer avoided the veranda. Every night, Elena would sit in her husband's chair, writing in a black leather journal. On one page, she wrote in neat, perfect script, "The new Whitfield line will rise from strength. My daughters will bear greatness." One night, Josiah tried to speak. "Mum, I don't mean disrespect, but this whatever you ask of me. It's not right." Elena's face hardened. "You will do as I say, Josiah. You owe your life to this house. You belong to it. Every part of you." He looked at her then, not as a slave, but as a man stripped of everything except his will. "No, Mum," he said quietly. "No one owns my soul." That sentence hung in the air like thunder. From that night on, Elena watched him differently, not with curiosity, but with fury. Rumors spread beyond the estate. A widow and a slave. A plan unnatural. Even the other planters pretended not to know. By the end of that summer, every soul on the Whitfield estate knew something terrible was coming. And inside the White Mansion, Elena's obsession turned inward. Toward her daughters. Toward the future she believed only she could control. The summer of 1843 was the hottest anyone could remember. The air itself felt heavy, as if the sky held its breath. The sun hung low over the Whitfield plantation, baking the earth, bleaching the cotton rows, and suffocating the workers beneath its gaze. Elena Whitfield sat on her veranda like a queen on a throne, her lace fan moving lazily, while she watched her world below, as silent and calculating as ever. Josiah worked near the house now. He moved with purpose, fixing shutters, lifting crates, tending to the horses in the stables. But in his quiet labors, something had shifted. He didn't look toward the mistress anymore. He didn't bow his head when she passed. His gaze lingered on the horizon, on the distant tree line, on anything but her. The daughters had changed too. Marianne, once quiet and obedient, now watched her mother with eyes sharp and wary. Louise, the second-born, spoke less and prayed more. Clara, still a child, clung to her older sisters whenever Elena entered the room. One night she whispered, "Mama looks like she's made of stone." Marianne held her close and said nothing. What was there to say? Life in the house grew colder, heavier. The servants avoided the main hall. The overseer stopped whistling on his rounds. Even the birds seemed to abandon the grounds at dusk. One evening, as thunder growled beyond the fields, Elena summoned Josiah to the drawing room. Shadows flickered across the walls from the fireplace. Her black ledger lay open on the table. Her quill rested in her hand. The air was thick with humidity and something else, something waiting. "You will sit," she said without looking up. Josiah stood a moment longer, his jaw tight, then pulled out a chair. The wood creaked beneath him. "You understand your role here," she began, voice soft, but sharp as a blade. "I understand I belong to this house," Josiah answered, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. Eleanor's eyes flashed, but she maintained her composure. Good. Because the time has come for the future to begin. My daughters will bear the next Whitfield generation. And you, she paused, will be the vessel. Josiah's hands clenched. The room felt smaller. Mum, he said slowly, with respect, that's not my choice. It's not a choice, she said, rising from her chair. It is destiny. You are strong, pure in body, if not in spirit. God brought you here for this purpose. He stood then, chair scraping loudly. God didn't bring me here. Men did. And this ain't natural. She stepped closer, her face inches from his. Nature obeys the strong, Josiah. The weak tell stories of sin and shame. But those born to rule reshape the world. Josiah said nothing. He turned, walked out, and left her standing alone in the flickering firelight. The next morning, Josiah was not at his post. He was near the fields, standing among the rows of cotton, speaking quietly with Marianne. She stood with arms crossed, her night hair still unbrushed, eyes full of fear. She's lost her mind, Marianne said. She talks about destiny, bloodlines, God's plan. She thinks she's saving us. Josiah stared at the ground. She means to use you too, he said softly. Marianne nodded, tears welling. I know. And am afraid. There's no leaving this place for me, he said. But maybe there's still time for you. No, Marianne said, her voice shaking. If I run, shall come after my sisters. After you. She's already gone too far. They stood in silence for a moment, the cicadas screaming from the trees, the heat pressing down on them like a hand. Josiah, she whispered. What will you do? He stared at her, his expression unreadable. What I've always done. Survive. Until I can do more. For days, Eleanor watched them both silent, seething, brimming with suspicion. She suspected betrayal in every glance, every whisper, every hesitation in her daughters' voices. The black journal filled with more lines. Strength must be taken. Greatness must be forged. That night, she called the daughters into the parlor. The candles were tall, the walls lined with portraits of Whitfields, long dead. My dears, she said, her voice smooth as silk, I have something to tell you. They stood before her, pale, fearful, uncertain. You are Whitfields. You were raised in grace. You are blessed with beauty. But beauty alone doesn't build a legacy. You must understand our blood must grow stronger. Our line must endure for generations. Louise gulped. Mother, what do you mean? Eleanor's smile was thin. You will do what is necessary. Marianne stepped forward, voice trembling but determined. Mother, this cannot be God's will. Eleanor turned her gaze toward her eldest daughter. You are too sentimental, Marianne. Your father's weakness lives in you. But I will not allow softness to destroy this family. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. Come here, Eleanor commanded. Marianne hesitated. Then slowly, she stepped forward. Eleanor reached out, brushing her daughter's hair from her face, fingers trembling. You will thank me one day, she whispered, when the Whitfield name is remembered for greatness. But Marianne knew there was no greatness in what her mother was building. Only ruin. That night, as lightning cracked across the sky, Marianne crept into the servant quarters. She found Ruth there, folding laundry by candlelight. Ruth, she whispered, I don't know what to do. The old woman looked at her with sad, knowing eyes. Child, your mama done lost her soul a while ago. What she wants ain't what God wants. You best run before she ruins you too. But where could I go? Marianne whispered. My sisters. Ruth leaned forward, her voice a low rasp. Then you best find someone who will stand up to her. Marianne's eyes lifted. Josiah. Ruth nodded. He's the only one. Days passed. Tension grew. Eleanor ordered the servants to prepare the parlor for a ceremony. Candles lined every surface. The curtains were drawn. The girls were forced into matching white dresses, the fabric stiff against their skin. Josiah was called to the main hall. When he entered, the silence was suffocating. Elelonena stood before the great double doors, her daughters trembling behind her. She held the black journal in her hand. "It's time," she said softly. "The new line begins tonight." But before she could say more, Marianne stepped forward. Her voice rang in the hush. "No, mother. This ends tonight." Elelonena's jaw tightened. "You forget yourself." Marianne raised her voice. "You forget God. You forget decency. You forget Father." Elelonena's face twisted with rage. "You will obey me." "I won't." Josiah stepped forward then, slow, deliberate, his body poised like a storm ready to break. "This house ain't holy, Mum," he said, voice low but firm. "And your God wouldn't want this." Elelonena stared at him, her eyes filled with fury and disbelief. "You dare speak to me of God?" Josiah didn't budge. "I dare speak as a man. Not your tool. Not your seed. Just a man." For a moment, no one breathed. Lightning flashed outside. The candles trembled. In that flicker, the daughters saw the truth. Their mother, once proud, was now consumed by madness. And Josiah, once silent, was now the only one willing to defy her. Elelonena lunged forward. But before she reached him, Josiah turned and swept Marianne behind him. Then began the sound of chairs toppling, the crash of glass, the scream of a woman who believed she could control fate. And as the thunder roared again, Josiah whispered, "It's time to run." The sky had turned black by the time they reached the back corridor of the grand plantation house. Rain battered the windows like hammer blows, and wind screamed down from the cypress trees. Josiah's breath was ragged, his pulse thunderous, but his voice remained steady as he whispered, "It's now or never." Marianne clutched the banister, heart thrumming, nightgown soaked with sweat. Upstairs, she could hear the echo of Elelonena's furious footsteps, the sound of a door slamming, the shrill call of her name. "Marianne, where are you?" Josiah grabbed her hand. "We don't got much time." They ran down the back stairs, the old wood groaning beneath their feet. In the shadows of the servants' quarters, a few faces turned to them, eyes wide, holding their breath. Some faces they knew, others they'd never dared speak to. But now in the storm, there were no walls, only fear. Ruth emerged from the darkness, her white hair plastered with sweat. "You're leaving," she whispered. "God help you." Josiah nodded. "We have to. She'll kill one of us if we stay." Ruth's weathered hands reached out and gently touched Marianne's cheek. "Child, don't look back. What's behind you is cursed." Footsteps sounded above, faster now, angrier, desperate. Marianne looked at Josiah. "She'll come for my sisters." "We'll come back for them," he whispered. "When we got help. But first survive." He turned toward the barn, where the lightning lit up the roof like a lantern. They moved silently, moving like shadows, slipping through the mud and rain. The ground felt alive beneath them, soaked by days of thunderous downpour. Their feet sank deep, their breaths short and quick. Behind them, the mansion rose like a haunted monument, its white columns glowing eerily in the storm's pulse. And at the top of the stairs, Elelonena Whitfield stood, black cloak whipping in the wind. "Traitors!" she screamed. "Traitor!" Her voice cut through the storm like a blade. They reached the barn. Inside, a horse snorted anxiously, hoofs striking the wooden floor. Josiah whispered, his voice low and sharp, "Easy, now easy." He loosened the reins, calmed the mare, and tied a small lantern to the saddle. Marianne stood by the doorway, glancing back at the mansion. Lightning flashed, revealing her mother's figure still standing there, wild, grief-stricken, eyes burning with madness. She looked away. "Let's go," she whispered. But freedom was never so simple. The dogs were set loose. Their howls rose above the wind, and the sound of gunfire followed. Josiah pushed Marianne up onto the horse, then leaped up behind her. They rode out into the darkened fields, the storm swallowing them whole. Mud splattered their legs. The cold air cut at their faces. Behind them, the overseer yelled orders, men's voices rising, desperate to track them through the wild night. They rode low, Josiah steering the horse toward the dark edge of the woods. The tree line loomed like a jagged wall, the forest beyond thick with shadow and threat. Marianne shivered, clutching Josiah's arm as lightning sliced the sky. "How far?" she whispered. "Not far," Josiah breathed. "There's a river. We follow it. Cross it. There's safety on the other side. But the dogs, we can't outrun him forever. We cross the river, and we lose him in the water." The thunder cracked again. They reached the edge of the woods just as the dogs burst into the open. The overseer was behind them, rifle in hand, shouting wildly, "Stop! Stop! You'll hang for this, boy." Josiah didn't answer. He turned the horse sharply and plunged between the trees. Branches tore at their skin. Bushes thrashed against their legs. The storm seemed to wrap itself around them, howling through the branches. But they could hear the dogs drawing closer. Closer. Josiah pulled the horse to a stop. "We go on foot," he said. "Horse'll make too much noise." "We're almost there." He slid down and helped Marianne to the ground. The earth squelched beneath their feet. Their clothes were drenched, their breaths visible in the cold night air. They pressed through the trees, Josiah leading, Marianne following close behind. The sound of water reached them, a rushing, violent stream. They broke through the last of the trees and saw it, the river, raging like fury, its surface black and roiling under the storm. Marianne stopped dead, terror rising in her throat. "We can't cross that." Josiah looked at the river, then at her. "We don't got a choice. They're close." Behind them, the barking drew nearer. He grabbed her hand again. "Trust me." She nodded through her tears. They stepped into the water. It was freezing, the current powerful, pulling at their legs. Josiah held her tightly, the water rising past their knees, past their waists. The rain made everything slippery, the mud clinging to their skin like clay. Marianne gasped as the water surged around her. She held onto Josiah like a lifeline. The dogs reached the river bank. Men shouted in the distance. Torches glowed in the darkness. And then lightning lit up the trees, and there she was, Eleanor Whitfield, standing on the river's edge, her black cloak soaked through, hanging like death itself. Her hair tangled in the wind, her face pale and hollow, eyes burning with something beyond madness. "Marianne!" she screamed. "Marianne, come back. Come back to me." Marianne froze. Her mother's voice was raw, broken. "I did this for you," Eleanor shrieked. "For all of you. For the Whitfield name. You are chosen. You are mine." Josiah pulled her step by step. "We're almost there," he whispered. "Don't look back." But Marianne looked. She saw her mother standing alone, the night swallowing her madness. And then the river carried them away, cold, wet, silent. By dawn, the river was calm again. The dogs had returned. The overseer rode back in fury. The plantation stood in silence. And in the upstairs bedrooms, 3 daughters hid beneath their blankets, listening for a voice that would never speak again. Eleanor Whitfield wasn't in her room. She wasn't in the parlor. She wasn't anywhere. All that remained was her Bible on the table, open to a line marked in blood-red ink. "Be not deceived. God is not mocked." The servants crossed themselves. The wind howled through the cracks in the house. The fields swayed under the gray morning sun. And somewhere, out on the water's edge, a new story began. The storm had passed by morning, but the sky over Georgia was thick with the weight of something left unfinished. The Whitfield plantation stood quiet to quiet. No sound of hooves, no voices calling across the yard, no clatter from the kitchen. Just a hollow stillness, like the breath held between the beat of a heart. Inside the great house, the candles had burned down to wax trails. The curtains hung limp. The floors were slick with rainwater blown in through broken window panes. Eleanor Whitfield sat alone at the grand dining table, still wearing her soaked black gown. Her hair hung in tangled ribbons, her eyes dark and unblinking. In her hands, she clutched the silver spoon Thomas had once used, rubbing it as though it still held warmth. "They're gone," she whispered. Her voice was barely more than a breath. "They're all gone." She didn't eat. She didn't rise. She didn't speak again, even when her daughters crept down the stairs, pale, frightened, peering around the corner at the woman who bore them. They saw her lips still moving, silently now, speaking to no one. Marianne was gone. Josiah was gone. And the house was empty in ways that walls and rooms could not contain. No one dared approach her. The servants, those who had fled during the storm, stayed out of sight. They prayed beneath their breaths, crossed themselves when the mistress passed. By dusk, word had spread across the county. 2 bodies were seen in the river floating, tangled in branches. A man and a young woman. Sightings from the swamp bend. But when the men went to recover them, there were no bodies to be found. The river had swallowed them, or saved them. The preacher returned the next day, riding slow, Bible in hand. He found Eleanor still seated at the table, her dress stained, her eyes hollow. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said softly, "you should rest." She didn't look at him, didn't blink. "I built something meant to last," she said. "And the Lord took it," the preacher murmured. "You built something the Lord never asked for." Her head turned, slowly, like a rusted hinge. Her eyes flashed with something fierce, something bright and awful. "You know nothing of what I built," she spat. "I tried to save this family, to purify what was dying." He took a step back, fingers tightening on his Bible. "You tried to play God, Mum," he said, "and that never ends well." When he left, she didn't watch him go. She just sat in silence, whispering to the wind. That night, thunder rolled through the distant hills, not from a storm, but like memory coming home. The girls heard footsteps in the upstairs hallway, though no one walked there. One swore she saw the shadow of a tall man pass her door, silent, dripping with water. Another claimed she heard her sister's name whispered in the garden. By morning, Eleanor's bed was empty. They found her Bible on the table open. A single line underlined in red ink. "Be not deceived. God is not mocked." No one saw her leave the house. No one saw where she went. Some say she walked into the woods and never returned. Others claim she stood in the river for hours, staring into its depths, whispering to the spirits she believed she controlled. But after that day, no one lived long in Whitfield House. 10 years passed. Travelers passing through swore the windows were always open, though the house was abandoned. Local children dared each other to touch the door, but most wouldn't go near after sunset. Farmhands said they heard weeping on rainy nights. Others swore they saw a pale woman standing at the upstairs window, her face pressed to the glass as lightning split the sky. The house changed hands 3 times. Each new owner tried to make it a home again, to scrub away the stains of the past. They moved furniture, painted walls, planted gardens. Each left within a year. Some said their livestock died without reason. Others heard voices from behind the walls. One man claimed he woke in the night to find a tall, silent figure standing at the foot of his bed, wet, barefoot, eyes filled with sorrow. He moved out the next morning. One night, a young woman from town wandered too close, drawn by the stories. She later swore she saw a shape beneath the old oak tree, a tall man, broad-shouldered, his skin glistening, as if still wet from rain. He turned toward her. Their eyes met, and then he vanished. Word spread like wind through dead leaves. Fathers warned their daughters to stay away. Mothers crossed themselves when they heard thunder. No one walked that road alone. By the time the Civil War came, the Whitfield mansion was a ghost of itself, vines crawling up the columns, shutters loose and crooked, the porch sagging under the weight of its own past. Soldiers camped near it once, seeking shelter from a summer storm. They fled before dawn, saying they heard screams from the walls. They said the widow still walked the halls, searching for her daughters. They said the daughters still called for the man who tried to save them. And they said that on nights when the river floods, you can still see two figures standing at its edge, tall and small, hand in hand looking back toward the house that damned them all. No one knows if it's true, but if you travel through Georgia, and you find a road lined with oak trees and old white stones, listen when the rain begins to fall. You might hear a woman whispering through the thunder, "The blood must mix." And if you hear that, run.